How soon is too soon to fire your gun in self-defense? Put differently, when should you and should you not fire your gun in self-defense? We'll talk about that in just a minute. First, I will tell you that we have a gun giveaway going on. It is happening right now and it is absolutely free. All you got to do is click the link in the description to learn which brand new gun you could win. All right, the question put to us was, how do I know if it's too soon to fire my gun in self-defense? Well, remember, we can only use deadly force, and using a firearm is always deadly force. Even if you say, well, I was just shooting at him in the leg. Using a firearm is always deadly force. Stop and think for a minute. You shoot somebody in the leg, it hits their femoral artery, they're going to be dead before the ambulance can even get there. So I don't want to hear about this, well, I was just shooting him in the leg or I was just trying to wound him or whatever. Using a firearm is always deadly force, and you can only use deadly force when you reasonably believe that you are facing an imminent threat of death or great bodily harm. And when I say you are facing, that can be you or somebody else you are willing to defend. Get off on a little bit of a tangent here. Who are you willing to defend? I'm willing to defend myself. I am willing to defend my kids, and I am willing to defend a handful of people who I really, really like. So the rest of that, I'm going to try to avoid that fight any way possible. You can defend third-party folks, but understand that you open yourself up to a lot of liability if you do that. So using your gun should only be a last resort. And we're getting back to this question of when is it too soon? It is too soon to use your firearm if you have any other reasonable means of escape. Even if you are in a stand your ground state or there is no duty to retreat, if you have a reasonable means to escape safely, please escape safely. Do that. Only use your firearm as a last resort. Again, you will hear me say that a lot in this video because the question is, when is it too soon to use your firearm? And again, if you have any reasonable means of escape, and talking about escape is very important because I am never going to tell you to turn your back on a loaded gun or to put yourself in danger while you are attempting to escape. If you can escape safely, then please escape safely. And that an example of that would be if you're at the scene of an active shooter situation and you have the opportunity to get out of there before the shooter notices you and starts firing in your direction, and you can go from one piece of good cover to another to an escape route, then I'm going to ask that you do that. Now, people will argue with me and say that, yeah, we got a gun, we should take this guy out, we should get in there and we should do that. What if you lose that fight and you can't go home to your family? Okay? Think about that. These are decisions you're going to have to make beforehand. So when is it too soon to use your gun? Well, if you have a reasonable means of escape, I would suggest you take that reasonable means of escape. It is also too soon to use your gun if a reasonable person witnessing this situation understands or thinks that, you know what, they might testify that you were not in danger, that this bad guy with a gun was too far away and you had other options that you could utilize. Again, difficult situation because a total stranger is testifying to the police or is making a statement to the police and testifying in court that they thought. And yep, you know what? That kind of stuff happens. And we have to deal with it. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. In many cases, it might be wrong. I don't want somebody else telling me what I have to do to defend myself or what they think I should do to defend myself. That's my decision. But they will still be able to make that statement to the police. They will still be able to go on the record, and that could influence a jury. So you need to keep that stuff in mind when we're talking about when is it too soon to use your gun. Now, if you're looking at a situation and, people understand when something is an imminent threat, and you should know that. You should feel it right in your gut that, wow, this has gone bad. And maybe there are some people out there who are just oblivious and they don't notice all the warning signs or something like that. But typically, if the situation is escalating and you don't feel like you're about to be killed, then it's too soon to use your gun. You're using your gun to stop this imminent deadly threat. So you might want to pull that gun out and pre-stage it and be ready for this situation, or you might be looking for a way to get out. And who knows, you might have to use your gun so that you can engage the bad guy so you can work your way to an escape route or something like that. But again, the question is, when is it too soon? Very difficult for us to answer in every situation because there's going to be a million what ifs. But if you can escape, please escape. Now, as a police officer, there's always this element of preclusion. We had to consider all of the other options and determine that none of those options would work before we could use our firearm in defense. Doesn't mean we had to try all of those options. We just had to believe that none of the other options would work to de-escalate this situation or stop this threat without using the firearm. You know, if you're facing somebody who you think you could reasonably control with hands-on or with some alternative weapon, do you carry an alternative weapon? Do you have pepper spray or a baton or an impact weapon of some sort that you could utilize instead of using a firearm? You need to consider whether or not that is the best option. I can't tell you when it's the best option. I don't know your level of training, your level of experience, how strong you are, how comparatively strong you are compared to the person who is right there in front of you presenting this threat. But is there some other option? Do you have some other option? Have you considered it? Now think about this. You might only have a couple of seconds to consider it. So you need to know, and you need to have a realistic idea of your abilities. Be honest with yourself. Can you fight physically if you need to go hands-on with someone? Can you physically fight, and do you feel comfortable protecting yourself against this person? Or are you vastly overmatched? Does this person outweigh you? Does this person have more experience fighting? Do they have a known history of violence? All of these things are going to be considered by the investigating officers, by the district attorney, and eventually in court, when people are playing out all of this information, when they're asking all of the questions and getting all the answers. The worst part about all of this is that it can take weeks and months of investigation into something that you only had a few seconds or maybe even a fraction of a second to decide. So I want you to start thinking about this before you are in a dire situation, before you are in that situation where a reasonable person would believe that you are an imminent threat of death or great bodily harm. Now, you've heard me say that quite a bit. Imminent threat. What makes a threat imminent? And imminent means it's happening right now. It is about to happen. It is right on the cusp of happening. So if you're facing an imminent threat, in order for that threat to be even considered imminent in the eyes of the law, the person who is the threatener, the person who is making the threat, has to have a weapon of some sort, and it could be fists or feet. It doesn't have to be a gun or a knife or something like that. They have to show intent, and that can be declared or it can be implied, but you have to be able to reasonably articulate that, yes, their actions showed intent for them to hurt you, to cause death or great bodily harm, and they have to be able to do it. They have to have what's called in police circles a delivery system or a means of doing this. If they don't have a means of doing that, you know, if a guy is sitting in a wheelchair, confined to a wheelchair, behind a chain link fence, swinging a machete, saying he's going to kill you, this guy certainly has a weapon. He certainly has intent. He's made it really clear that he's going to kill you, but he can't, while confined to that wheelchair, get through that chain link fence and start hitting you with that machete. So you can't use deadly force. You can't use your firearm to stop that threat. You can leave the area, again, escape safely. Certainly that's what we want you to do. Again, last resort. That gun is only your last resort. You need to know all of these definitions. You need to run them through your brain, and you need to play that game of what if. You should be doing that often anyway. What would I do if someone started shooting right now? What would I do if somebody approached me and demanded my wallet? What would I do if I came out to the parking structure and there's somebody hanging around my car? Answer those questions before you are forced to answer those questions. It's like preventive maintenance for your personal protection plan. Think about that stuff. It's not being paranoid, it's being prepared. Think about that stuff before it happens. And remember, I've always said, your body can't go where your mind hasn't been. If you are suddenly confronted with something you never imagined before, you are going to pause, you're going to stop, you're going to have to try to figure it out. If you think about the options and the possibilities beforehand, and you start thinking about what you might do, those options become much more clear, and you typically can make your decision much more quickly. You understand what it is you want to do, and if you know the laws and you know your options, you understand what it is you can do. And remember, there is a great difference between what you are able to do and what you are allowed to do. Think about that. Some people might just decide, nope, I'm not allowed to do that, so they're not even going to consider it. But there might be situations where, you know what, you're not officially allowed to do that until you are faced with this imminent deadly threat. And then you are able to do it, so do it. Protect yourself, because the most important thing is that you come out of this unharmed. Not that you survive the incident, because survival could mean that you're confined to a wheelchair, but you survived. I don't want that. I want you to prevail. You have a better chance of prevailing in this incident if you think about this stuff beforehand. You asked and answer those questions on when I should use my firearm. So if you're asking, when is it too soon to use your firearm? It's too soon to use your firearm if you don't reasonably believe that you are in imminent danger of death or great bodily harm. All of the rest of that stuff is wrapped around into all sorts of legal definitions that you need to learn and think about before the worst day of your life happens. You're pulled over by the police and you're carrying concealed. Do you need to do anything special in this scenario? Like tell the officer you have a gun. Click this video right next to me and I'll break down that scenario step by step on what you should do.